So this is going to be one of the best covers for an animation art book. Mostly that's due to the awesome artwork, but everything else about the design that augments that is also stunning. The red foil dragons, the material and construction of the dust jacket, even the cover of the book itself, it's all marvelous. But even though it has a more snazzy and deluxe look and feel compared to your typical animation art book, I do want to correct a piece of erroneous information where the dust jacket's blurb claims this book is a collector's edition. It's not. This is the only edition of the book, so don't get reeled in or confused by that false advertising. The book was published by Insight Editions in 2008, a publisher at the time known for making the most beautiful looking books with the worst binding. Thankfully this one isn't too bad to compare to something like The Art of Kung Fu Panda 2, and I haven't seen any other complaints about the binding for this book. However, it's still clearly not the best. It's a little loose and fragile, particularly the pages at the ends. I've noticed some cracking and weakening. Nothing that's really an issue, and I've been using it for years, but I did want to mention it because to buy this book secondhand nowadays is very expensive, so if you do go looking for a copy you may want to inquire about the state and strength of the binding just in case. As for the content of the book, let's start with the negatives because there's only two and both stem from the same root, and that is the sizing and layout are very unimpressive and amateurish, rarely optimized and often weird or even downright brain dead. Mostly images that are way too large, but then also ones that are too small while also having blank space right next to them. Even the choice of which images are made overly large versus those that are too small is often really bizarre, making no sense. And even beyond sizing, just layout stuff like this that makes me think, how is it even possible for a paid professional designer, let alone a whole publishing team, to see something like this and not be like, maybe just shrink that down a tad and have all of them on one page. Like, this isn't a subjective or aesthetic choice, this is objectively wrong and stupid at the most basic level of common sense. However, I wouldn't call any of this a serious issue that defines the book. Certainly no worse than the layout we see for 90% of other books, but I point it out because I get so flummoxed that it's even possible. The bigger issue with the layout that I do consider a genuine weakness and biggest letdown of the book, and that is the number of overly large images is causing a disappointing lack of content. It's not terrible, certainly nothing approaching a deal breaker, just unimpressive and less than ideal, especially when in the author's introduction she says this is a showcase of 300 artworks chosen from tens of thousands created for the movie, and that kind of irks me. It just feels like a very foolish tease to announce just how much there was potentially to put in this book, but then only offering comparatively so little when there's no reason for it beyond pointlessly extravagant and wasteful sizing of many of the images. Granted, there are plenty of instances where large and full-page images are used to great effect, and I wouldn't change them, but there's also way too many unnecessarily big ones, and for this kind of art in a book this size, it could have easily included another 100 to 200 images in here, which is significant. Now, to be fair, I'm holding this book to an ideal standard, because if you compare it to the Disney Pixar art books from Chronicle at the time, so like say The Art of Up or The Art of Bolt, they had a lower page count and certainly no better layout, but honestly I don't find much consolation in it being more impressive than even crappier books, compared to just expecting it to be better handled in its own right, in terms of it being very obvious that this kind of layout is creating a frustrating and unnecessarily suboptimal experience for a book like this. Thankfully, however, this issue is absolutely outweighed by the positive things this book does. The most impressively handled aspect of the book, the thing that makes me absolutely adore it both as a fan of the movie and of art books in general, is the stellar curation. Quantity and layout aside, obviously, but the choice of images and focus of the book is fantastic. Specifically, its emphasis on showcasing visual development. I would say about half of the images are for early designs and explorations, as opposed to the unfathomably underwhelming decision of 90% of art books that choose to focus on showing final designs and character models, props, and backgrounds that look like materials that were just handed off to the 3D modeling and animation departments to instruct in creating the final film. And yeah, probably about half this book is made up of that too, with too many CG renders and final character lineups, but compared to what I've come to expect from art books, I'm just ecstatic by this wise choice to have at least half of the books focused beyond the true concept art. The work that inspired what you see on screen, not what literally dictated it. The early visual development works and explorations that may not exactly reflect the final frame, but are unquestionably more beautiful and imaginative because they're being used to explore and define the feel of the movie, rather than the literal final look. Even if, as is the case here, many of the differences are quite minor, it's still more interesting to look at because you haven't seen it before and can think about the changes, encourages you to study and appreciate the work more, or just spark your own imagination for things that could have been. Because it's not just early stuff, but also plenty of alternative and discarded ideas, loads of characters and locations that don't appear in the movie at all. Though, having said that, pretty much all of those characters do appear in the sequels, specials, and TV series, which is obviously not the book's fault. There's no way the creators could have known that, so I still consider it praiseworthy, but I want to mention that for your sake so you're not disappointed by me saying that the book contains stuff not seen in the first movie, that doesn't necessarily mean you haven't seen it in later Kung Fu Panda media. The other great thing about the quality and style of the art in this book is that even when you are looking at stuff that is very similar or identical to what appears on screen, it's still an absolute delight to look at due to its beauty and visual charms. And so what this book lacks in quantity is made up for in quality, because the 300 pieces they've chosen are outstanding. Obviously this is pretty subjective, but I think it's all so beautiful, and there's a really wonderful variety of styles and looks that define it and give it its own feel and identity among art books. Even stuff that I usually don't care for, like a lot of the character pose and facial study sketches, but even those in this book are remarkable, though having said that, there's a lot of them to the point of definitely being overused. They're almost exclusively done by Nicholas Marley, who's probably the largest single contributing artist to the book, which makes sense because it was his work the directors chose to define the unified style of the characters, and don't get me wrong, I think his work is phenomenal and deserves to be in an art book. It's just that given the relatively limited number of pieces the book contains, far too much has been given to his character work at the expense of including other stuff, because for both characters and locations there was some really great, really early stuff from 2003, which was before Nicholas was brought on, and there's a little bit of that represented in here, so it's certainly not like the book dropped the ball on its otherwise wonderful approach to variety and early explorations, but it is an area where it could have been making more of its best aspects and creating a better balance, by adding more visual variety and styles from more artists, and in terms of making this a better and truer chronicle of the work done on the movie. There's also a very pleasing amount of my absolute favorite type of art to see in any art book, in fact just my favorite type of art period, which are the works that feel like they're capturing a moment from a world. It might convey implied or explicit narrative or just simply be characters walking around town, but that feels like the artist has gone into that world and taken a photo. It's art that gives a holistic sense of life, reality, and context to the characters and world, and conveys something beyond literal design instructions like you see in the type of works I was talking about earlier that are more just utilitarian character, prop, or concept pieces that are presented as isolated individual elements that exist in a lifeless vacuum. And again, there's plenty of that stuff in here too, but overall I'm very impressed with this book's wisdom in predominantly choosing the types of images I consider contribute to the true purpose, value, and enjoyment of an art book, which has caused it to succeed so admirably where most other art books fail. Another surprisingly successful aspect of the book is its text. I do not like the style it's written in. It's done in that toadying, adjective-heavy PR style that's just so annoying in how hammy and artificial it reads. There's definitely too much telling you about the story and characters, and its use of the pull quotes is absolutely worthless. So yeah, definitely not perfect, with too much being shallow sound bites and fluff. But aside from that, for 60 to 70% of the text, it still delivers the goods in terms of providing excellent, insightful, and interesting information. Mostly specific commentary on images you're looking at, which helps avoid those general catch-all comments, which is fantastic, and it reflects the direction of the image curation, with the focus being on recounting the development, evolution, and ideas behind the designs. Again, with the highlights being when it mentions a lot of the earliest ideas in the conception and writing that were later cut and changed. It's really interesting, and there's quite a bit of that. And also stuff pointing out details and inspirations, or giving reasons behind why something is the way it is. So yeah, for most of the text, it's really enjoyable to learn about, complements and enhances the imagery, and so even though there's not a ton of text, the text that is here, on the whole, provides genuine value and enjoyment to the book. So then you get to the end of the book, and what's this? An envelope telling us to prepare for awesomeness. Ooh, yeah, well. So remember at the end of the movie how disappointed, confused, and cheated Tai Lung feels when he realizes the dragon scroll contains nothing? Yeah, well, this is like that, but it's worse than nothing. Ta-da! Wow, that was really worth it. And look, there's nothing bad about this, so it's better than nothing, right? Wrong. The reason I say it's worse than nothing is because if it wasn't included, who cares? It would have no impact on your opinion of the book. But for them to go to this effort and expense of including a removable extra and then telling you to prepare for awesomeness just to disappoint you with something so anticlimactic and pointless, that's a negative feeling and so worse than nothing.